With over 800 billion cups of coffee consumed each year worldwide, coffee is kind of a big deal. At 56%, more Americans drink coffee than don't, and all told, they spend $40 billion a year on it. With over 55,000 coffee shops in the US, in many cities you're barely more than a few blocks from the nearest one. But if that's still too far, you'll likely find coffee in a break room, any restaurant, gas station, or even hotel lobby. Coffee is pretty much anywhere. But what if that all went away, and you still really wanted your cup of coffee? Then where would you have to go? And how hard would it be? Well, that's what I'm gonna find out. Despite its usual abundant convenience, coffee itself isn't actually all that convenient. First off, coffee only grows in the tropics, and then, usually only in the mountains, where the extreme temperature swings between day and nights help give the coffee a strong flavor. To decide the best location to get my beans, I sampled a wide variety through cafe imports and discovered the Mexican beans from the state of Oaxaca were actually what I preferred best. So that's where I'm gonna have to go, to the mountains of Oaxaca, with 6 hours of flights, followed up by an 8-hour bumpy car ride down the narrow, windy Mexican roads. At the end of this journey, I arrived at the tiny village of Guadalupe Miramar. I could tell we arrived because I could look right out the window and see coffee trees right there beside the road. The next morning, I entered the field and started the harvest of FRA.
4 años para que empiece la producción. Entonces lo que hacemos nosotros en el tiempo de madurez, ya listo para cortar los granos de café, son estos, tienen que estar uniformes. Todos los colores deben de estar rojos, todo rojo. Entonces escogen todo lo rojo. Este no, este tampoco, estos no, puro rojo.
Going through by hand, we collected the berries, selecting out just the red ones and throwing them in the basket. I'd never actually seen a coffee tree before, so it was rather surprising to see this is where your morning cup of coffee comes from. If I made a drink from these trees, I'd expect it to turn out more like a fruit drink.
Por lo regular metemos mano de obra, pueden trabajar 2 o 3, los que están piscando y el otro encargado que se lleva los costales hasta el beneficio húmedo.
While spending an hour picking the handful of beans I needed for my cup of coffee wasn't too horrible, couldn't imagine spending my days traversing the rugged mountainsides picking berries off of the trees every single day. Next up, the berries need to be separated, so I met with Froilan, who helped me wash and separate the good and bad berries.
Muy buenos días, buenos días. Mi nombre es Froilan España Ortiz y podemos hacerlo. Mire, este se vacía.
The type of floating berries gave me some flashbacks to another incident from an earlier project. The coffee cherries are immersed in water. Bad or unripe fruit will float and are discarded, while the good berries will sink to the bottom. After that, we use a pulping machine to separate the skin and pulp from the beans. Can I try this?
Con todo gusto, sí.
The rising sun was starting to get into my eyes a little bit, and Froilan graciously gave me one of his hats to help keep the sun out of my eyes. It was a little small. Of all the people I met along the way, Froilan was one of my favorites. Very energetic and super friendly. I still have his hat. We met him because he also runs a local corner store, where we first ran into him the first night when we went to get a soda. Despite also being a farmer for over 50 years, he's still been having difficulty breaking into the market and selling his coffee at a fair market price. Knowing how much is normally spent on seemingly overpriced cups of coffee, it was a strange perspective to meet someone who's not even able to get a fair price for the actual beans themselves. Next, my beans still need to be dried. So I laid them out in the sun where they dry for several days. From these, the poor quality beans are removed, and the rest are ready to be exported. All right, so now I got my coffee to take back with me. Usually goes through an extra step where they remove the outer skin before exporting, but I'm gonna take this home and do that manually myself. With the outer parchment layer of the beans removed, it's time to roast them. In preparation for this project, I previously learned some roasting tips from the master roaster at Dunn Brothers, such as slowly roasting my beans until they reach just the right color, and to listen for the distinctive first crack for a lighter roast or a second crack if I want a darker roast. I think we're hearing some of the first crack now. Yep, definitely some of the first crack. So we're getting into a medium roast now, which is about where I want it. So I think I'll give it, yep, definitely cracking. So I think we're basically done now. So I'm gonna take it off, put it into the colander here, and look cool. After carefully cooling and letting the beans breathe, next up they'll need to be ground and brewed. Also in preparation, I learned several possible brewing methods from Jackson at Peace Coffee. But he claimed in the end, if you know what you're doing, simpler equipment can be used.
I can brew you a good cup of coffee using the cheapest piece of stovetop cookware and a sock as a filter.
So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna use a sock. Thanks to modern trade and specialization, you can have a fresh cup of coffee ready for you in minutes, almost anywhere in the world. But without that convenience, it took me a 6-hour flight, an 8-hour drive, an hour of harvesting by hand, several hours of washing and separating, several days of sun drying, then bringing them home to roast and brew myself. And the worst part of all is that I had to do all that before having my morning cup of coffee. But now, I have it. And it tastes, it's all right. Chocolatey, leathery, has a little bit of a grassy taste, yet at the same time a little bit of a darker roast taste. Dark. It's got a hint of coffee to it. Doesn't even taste like dirty laundry. It's kind of a inconsistent roast. It's kind of left with an interesting mix. I'm glad I can say that if it came down to it, I can make a cup of coffee from scratch. But in the meantime, I'm glad I can just go down to any local coffee shop and just order a cup of coffee and enjoy it. It's a lot more convenient. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and check out our other videos where we deconstruct other everyday items that we take for granted, such as a chocolate bar or a sandwich. If you enjoy our videos, be sure to support us on Patreon so we can afford to keep making more videos like this in the future. Thanks again.